Eustace Kid has a secret. This secret involves something that he stole from Big Mom, something that Shanks stole from him, and something that the world government stole from the world. Which I guess is their right as the world government and all, but Kid is having none of it. And here's why he's going to be integral to bringing about the dawn of the world. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and I'm traditionally not the biggest fan of Eustace Kid, which did prompt me to think, what am I missing here? And as it turns out, I was missing this, and even this. I was missing a lot. And now I'm pretty damn hyped for Kid. Just as I'm hyped for Bob the Penguin, Brittany Brown, and McDurples, all three of whom have ascended by subscribing to the Grand Line Review, which will result in consistent injections of One Piece culture being administered directly into your YouTube feed. And if you want to be our next subscriber of the day, then hit the button and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the Grand Fleet. Welcome. All right. Let's justify Kid's existence. Eustace Kid 101 is a rarely taken course that begins in his home realm of South Blue, because as much as Kid's childhood is surrounded by a series of thick veils attained from the One Piece world equivalent of Spotlight, which is an Australian store, and I don't know if any of you will get that joke, it doesn't matter, because Kid's origins are already quite important. Because Kid's mechanical motif is actually a bit of a South Blue trademark that you'll see incorporated into many Southerners such as Southern Cyborg Frankie, Lindbergh of the Revolutionary Army, and even Bartholomew Kuma, whose Sorbet Kingdom was located in the southest of Blues. Also, incredibly random fact here, but apparently Jaguar D Sol is also from South Blue, meaning that this sea may very well have its own island of giant dude men. But of the four blues, the South seems to be something of an industrial hotspot. Just as West Blue is known as being a hub for the underworld, North Blue is known for its upper-class aristocracy, and East Blue is known for green afroed men in boxers. However, Kid was born at a very, very inconvenient time in that they're South Blue. Post-time skip, Kid is 23. Now, who else do we know who is 23? Off the top of my head, no one. It's a stupid age. But we do know someone who was meant to be 23. And that would be one podcasty ace. If he were alive today instead of being dead yesterday, he would be 22. However, that's also not quite true, because if Ace had emerged from his mother's birth gate at the time in which nature intended, then he would actually be 23. Meaning that Eustace Kid was actually born during the Great Search for Roger's heir. And when I say search, I of course mean child massacre. And when I say great, I mean not a very nice thing to do. But during this time, the world government tracked down Ace's whereabouts to the island of Batorilla in South Blue. You know, the sea where Kid just so happened to be born at that very time. Kid is legitimately lucky to still be alive. In an age where a whole generation of children were wiped out, Kid somehow survived. However, the legacy of this event may not have been quite lost on him, as in his One Piece Vivia databook entry, apparently he became a pirate to, quote, rebel against those he considered the scum who ruled the world, who we know are the world nobles because he uses those exact words to describe them on Sabadi. And he followed this up by saying, compared to the high and mighty in their simple pure hearts, the world's villains are much more humane. Which is particularly striking coming from Eustace Kid, a pirate known almost exclusively for his excessive brutality used against citizens. But look, this settles things, right? Kid's mission in this world is to rebel against the world government for doing bad things to good, maybe not good, but at least less bad people. Well, no. Kid's ambition, much like the I before E except after C rule in English, is surprisingly complex and contradictory, with the words neighbor, glacier, height, albeit weird, science, and forfeit all serving as examples of why every rule in English is purposely designed to confuse non-English speakers. And Kid's dream is quite similar in that it is unnecessarily confusing. As stated previously, his spark to become a pirate was to rebel against the world government, which is nice and all, but Kid has also been cited as holding the ambition to become the Pirate King. In chapter 505, he even mentions killing anyone who laughed at that dream on his way to Sabadi, which, just as a slight tangent, makes him something of an anti-Luffy. When Luffy's dream was laughed at by Bellamy in the narratively relevantly named Mocktown, Luffy chose the exact opposite course of action by deeming it not worth fighting, a philosophy that was imparted through to him at a young age through the incident with Shanks and Higuma. You know, the one where Shanks coined his trademark catchphrase, "Oh my, what a mess." Ha, classic Shanks there. Which I suppose also makes Kid something of an anti-Shanks, which will become important very shortly. Because in chapter 1029, Kid's dream was redefined once more, this time through Basil Hawkins, who stated, will he being Kid, succeed at his dream of hunting down an Emperor of the Sea? Which has led to the now kind of common misconception that Kid has held this lifelong and highly selfish ambition of taking down an emperor purely for his own personal glory. And I don't blame people for thinking that, because Kid's goals are a bit like, all over the place. So it's usually best to go with the most recent information, even if that information was given to us by a highly unreliable source. Because for a literal fortune teller, Basil Hawkins is a pretty abysmal source of insight, although he is a great source of nourishment for horses. So he does have something going for him. It's also worth diving into some of the meta aspects here, which is that Kid was the only supernova who Oda had any plans for whatsoever. When Oda revealed that he essentially made up all of the supernova at the last possible second, he made special mention that Kid was intended to become quite an important character, which is why I can't really dismiss his dream inconsistency as some sort of improvised writing. These three ambitions all relate to each other in a process that I'm going to describe as somehow. And the crimson cock-a-hoop key to that there somehow is Shanks. Cock-a-hoop is a real word, by the way, which means extremely and obviously pleased. And according to Google, this is how you would use it in a sentence. The team is cock-a-hoop at winning its first game of the season. Again, English is a questionable language. But whilst Luffy spent 2 years physically assaulting animals at the behest of a boozy old man, Kid spent that time tearing up the new world, challenging pirates, marines, and emperors left, right, and center. And those things that I just said in turn challenged Eustace Kid left, right, and center, with one emperor even managing to overcome his left. Which is a very convoluted way of saying that the red hair pirates cut off Kid's left arm. And thanks to Kid's prison confessional, we know that Shanks was the first emperor Kid targeted. That's how he lost his arm, and then he moved on to attack Big Mom. Except according to Kid's own words, he actually had no intention of challenging her directly. His attack on the Mega Matriarch's forces was conducted in order to acquire something. And this is something that is still the cause of much debate within the fan base to this very day. Most people are quick to assume that it was her poneglyph collection. However, during Whole Cake Island, Big Mom herself confirms that nobody is able to access her fancy stones since that time where that scallywag Roger managed to conduct a clever ruse. So if not a poneglyph, then what was it? Well, I asked all of you, and some very classically Grand Fleet answers came back to me. He took her to bed and left her without a kid, which I like because it's a pun on the word kid. He probably took some mochi, crackers, smoothies, and other snacks. And yeah, he did take at least one of them. Kid was said to have wounded one of the sweet commanders, which I assume was either snack or cracker. Because katakuri is, well, he's katakuri, and smoothie is more of a very legsome decoration. But according to the Grand Fleet, the most important thing that Kid took was, he took the W. And I should say there were a lot of serious answers, such as an eternal pose to Elbaf, or boring logical stuff like treasure and supplies. Whatever it was though, it was important to Kid's overall plan, which at this stage was still to beat Shanks. In fact, Kid formed a whole worst generation alliance on the premise of dethroning Shanks alone. And that's very relevant because Kid seems to hold particular reverence for this individual emperor. And I just realized that reverence is the wrong word to say because that means the opposite of what I want to mean. So let's just pretend that I said something relevant like repugnance or even revengeance and move on. But sure, Kid has come into conflict with other emperors, Big Mom out of necessity to steal something she had, and Kaido as well, but Kaido brought the fight to Kid. And you know what, come to think of it, Kid has actually fought against more emperors than Luffy has at this stage, which is, that's kind of something. I don't count Blackbeard because he wasn't an emperor when Luffy punched him deep in the cherry pie storage during Impel Down. However, if Kid ever did get into a conflict with Blackbeard, then that would complete his emperor collection. But the question remains, why Shanks? And to answer this, many people have tried to draw connections between the two characters over the years because there are some pretty undeniable parallels. Both of them have red hair, both of them have scars over their left eyes, and both of them have a left missing arm. It's possible that it's just a coincidence. I don't usually like forming connections on evidence as dubious as hair color, and especially because facial scars and missing arms aren't particularly uncommon in One Piece, but at the very least it is quite notable that this source of tension happens to be between Shanks and his junkyard budget equivalent. So what comes next is your classical run of speculation, which sounds more or less like Shanks is Kid's father, or Shanks is Kid's brother, or Shanks is Kid's cousin once removed. And by once removed, I mean that both of their arms were once removed. You know how it goes. However, the current overwhelming amount of evidence does not support a blood-based connection. For example, example, Kid's home is South Blue, whereas Shanks is from West Blue, with the words South and West being different and therefore not the same. Furthermore, the ages are a bit awkward, because to have fathered this particular kid, Shanks would have needed to do so at the age of 16 years old. And that 16 years is also a pretty big gap for siblings, not impossible I suppose, but unlikely. However, this whole kerfuffle may have less to do with Shanks himself, and more to do with a connection to one of Shanks's associates. And just a bit of a warning here, this next idea is what I would describe as wild speculation. It is interesting, but take it like a zombie, with a massive sack of salt shoved down your unsuspecting throat. There's a very niche theory within the One Piece community that states that Kid's father was in fact Captain John. The same Captain John who left a treasure which Buggy was trying to find, the same Captain John whose corpse was seen on Thriller Bark, and also the same Captain John who was once a member of the Rocks Pirates. And this comes from zero in-world evidence. In fact, everything we know about this comes rather bizarrely from reality. Because Eustace Kid's name is taken from the real-life pirate William Kidd, except William Kidd has 2 Ds, whereas Eustace only has 1, and as we all know in One Piece, whoever has the most D wins. But William was actually born from the genetic fluids of a man named Captain John. Captain John Kidd to be precise, except that John spelled his last name as K-Y-D, because yes, the world really needed a third different way to spell the word kid. But that's it. It is hypothesized that Eustace Kidd is the son of Captain John, pretty much solely based on the idea that in real life, Kidd was the kid of another kid. Given Oda's fascination with historical connections, I definitely wouldn't rule it out. However, if this theory were a condom, then I would be worried we'd be stretching it a bit too thin and risk becoming pregante with headcanon. However, its truth would create some potential animosity towards Shanks, a former member of the Roger Pirates, with Roger being that mustache charlatan who brought down the Rocks Pirates and thus Captain John. Although John, as with many of the Rocks, did go on to captain his own crew before they eventually performed a mutiny and did him a bit of the death. What I also think doesn't help is how common the name John was and honestly still is. Because hot take of the video, there should be less Johns in the world. I think we have enough. But currently there aren't many other reasonable explanations for Kid's fixation on Shanks. You've got the unlikely family tension, then you've also got the your daddy beat my daddy tension, or there's the third option, which is that Kid considers Shanks to be the scum of the world. The idea being that Kid knows something we don't. Something that allows all of his goals to coalesce. The first of which is to beat an emperor. And Shanks, well, he's certainly one of those, so big tick. The second is to become the Pirate King. And well, beating the former Pirate King's last remaining legacy is a solid step onto that path. But the third goal was to rebel against the scum of the world, which requires briefly diving into the evil Shanks realm. Because if he did have some sort of world nobly heritage, then that would wrap up Kid's goals very, very nicely. And it's not entirely insane. I personally think that evil Shanks is unlikely to be a thing, but his connection to the world government is a different matter altogether. He does have a distinctly cordial relationship with the 5 Elder Stars, apparently having the power to stroll into Marishwa and call a meeting with them without them so much as batting an eyelid, which sounds rather painful, and whenever somebody says that, I always imagine someone being hit in the eye with a baseball bat. But Mr. Shanks certainly does have a lot of mysteries to answer for, particularly because the 5 Elder Stars seem to place their complete trust in him, despite having one of the most powerful theoretical enemies of the world government placing his OP posterior on their rather uncomfortable looking green couches. And so the mystery of Eustace Kidd will continue for a while longer. The world government stole a generation of children. The red hair pirates robbed Kidd of his left arm, and then Kidd stole a mystery object from Big Mom, and were it not for Kaido's interference, he would certainly be preparing for war with Shanks at this very moment. And you can prepare with this next video because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.